Really quickly, I saw that there's, I would say 30% of us have quite a few outstanding documents. It may not be anyone here, but in general, I've noticed that there's quite a few assignments missing for a few people. You only have until tomorrow midnight to turn in any late work. So you can't turn in late work on the last day of class. You only have until tomorrow at midnight. I really want to impress upon you to try to get those documents in. Please remember that in order to graduate, you have to pass this class. Hopefully by now you realize it's not a hard class, even though it may be a little irritating for some, but you have to pass this class. I really hate to see people having to take this class over and over and over again. That is just not very economical. So I'm going to try and help as much as I can. Like week 3, week 4 is open until tomorrow evening. Obviously on Thursday you have 2 assignments due, which is your final and your career plan. So those will be, and then your live session, those will be open on Thursday, but everything else will close tomorrow at midnight. Do you have any questions? Um, some people were asking, and again, it's not many of you here, but nothing can be reopened from weeks 1 and 2. Now, what I will do is if you went to your mock interview, and I got a report that you went to your mock interview, if you didn't turn in your mock interview, interview schedule, I'll give you credit for that because obviously you went to the mock interview. And the same for your resume. Like if you didn't do your initial resume date like you're supposed to, but you did do it later and you sent in your signed resume, I'll give you credit for meeting with them. I also want to remind you to please do your thank you letter. I see a lot of people didn't do the thank you letter. Like that's something you should do anyway, not just for the grade, just courtesy. You want to thank them if you went to your mock interview, like, and then the debrief. Like those to me are really simpler assignments, right? Because you're really just reflecting on what you did. So week 3 is still going to be open until tomorrow at midnight. Do we have any questions on that? Okay. This week we're going to be in chapters 13 and 14. 13 is simple enough. It's really just talking about things that you want to consider when you start work. Some of it you already know. Some of it may be new to you if this will be your first career position. So I'll dig a little bit deeper into that. But most of this you will probably already know. So this idea of imposter syndrome, has anyone ever heard of that before? Imposter syndrome? Give me a thumbs up. That's familiar to you. Okay, I see. Anybody want to explain what it means? All right, I'll do it. All right. So imposter syndrome is really about you feeling like, let's say when you graduate and you are guys are all VA and you're electrical and you're welders and you're HVAC and you start the job and you look around and you're like, man, what am I doing here? I'm going to have to fake it until I make it. And somehow you feel as if you don't belong because maybe you just graduated. Maybe you feel like the people around you know more than you. They're better than you at the job. You know, all these different things we tell ourselves. And in reality, you are exactly where you're supposed to be, because obviously if you're not supposed to be there, you wouldn't be there, right? Somebody thought enough of you to give you the job, so clearly you belong. A lot of people have imposter syndrome, like celebrities, um, you know, uh, sports people, people that get a lot of success for whatever reason, and then they somehow feel like, oh, I don't, I didn't earn this, so I'm not supposed to be here. You know, you don't want to walk in with that mindset. It's okay to be anxious. I mean, who isn't? Fear the unknown is a healthy human thing. But, you know, you do know what you do know. And that is something that you can be confident about. Like, you don't know what you don't know, but what you do know is what you do know. Does that make sense? So, this idea of, what you know and what I think others know is always you think that other people know more than you, or that, they're, more experienced than you. And some of that may be true, but that does not mean that you're not bringing something to the table. So just walk in confidence with what you do bring to the table, right? That's all you can bring anyway, is what you bring to the table. You can't worry about what's on somebody else's plate. Just worry about what's on your plate. So be confident and walk into your job knowing that you're right where you're supposed to be. When you do start your job, like I said, we all know that there's going to be overwhelming, there's going to be exciting, there's going to be tons and tons of paperwork. Now, when are in your career job, of course, there's things that we know about, like I-9 and W-4 forms. But if this job is going to be your first career job offering healthcare, so you may have benefit forms, may have you do 401k and retirement benefits and all of that. So make sure and you typically don't have to fill that all out right then and there. But, if you have kids, you may want to make sure you bring their social, and make sure you have your social if you don't know it by heart by now. If you're as old as me, you've been saying it your whole life. But, those types of things that you want to have on hand. If you already have doctors, and, make sure you have that information. Now, most companies will give you a few days to get that stuff done. But, there are some documents that they're going to want you to fill out on that day. We already know to be on time, like, be before time. In the military, we say if you're on time, you're late. So, be there before time. I think 15 minutes is always a good, window, and it just says something about you, right? It says that you're ready to go, that you're excited about the job. You never want to arrive after everyone else on your first day. Like, that's the worst case scenario. So definitely make sure you know where you're going, make sure you're on time. you know I know that's happened to me before. Unfortunately, you live long enough, everything happens to you, where I'm thinking I'm supposed to be at one place and I was actually supposed to be somewhere else, right? You don't want that drama. Or you have to go through security, and then you have to park a certain place, and all different kinds of things like that. Most of you won't have any remote work, but there's a few. It just depends. I keep saying this because we don't know where we're all going, where you may have to do some onboarding online. That may be a possibility, but, so just be mindful of that. It's good to ask questions. Definitely, if you have to do any onboarding, sometimes where you onboard may not be the place where you're going to work. Again, don't let anybody give you assumptions, especially HR. You have to be mindful that when you're at a larger institution, HR could be like in Tampa, and they can have offices all throughout Florida. So make sure you ask questions like, where is onboarding going to be? Is it going to be on my job site? Is it going to be at the corporate office? If there's only one place, you don't have to worry about it. But many of you are going to be on job sites, so you're not going to be working in your office, aside from maybe VA. So you're definitely going to want to ask those questions, because location can sometimes, throw you off, right? And you want to make sure you're not going somewhere for the first time you don't know that. Got it? Um, Hopefully you'll have new hire training. Again, I have to preface this with, depending upon where company you're going to work for. Um, if you do have training, I'm going to tell you this now. Listen. That's the time to ask questions, especially let me back up. During your onboarding, make sure you're asking the questions you need to ask. If anybody here knows, and give me a thumbs up if this is not true, during onboarding is the best time to get a hold of HR, because most times HR, they're onboarding or they're offboarding, or they're doing evaluations, which we'll talk about. And it's very difficult to get a hold of HR, in some companies if they don't have you don't have their undivided attention. When you're in that orientation, that is the time to ask the questions that weren't answered. Again, overtime, flex time, when do my benefits kick in? Do I have to go for security badges? All those different things. Like, what you don't want to do is get to a job site. And again, maybe your job site is not the corporate office and you don't have your stuff together, right? And then you're going around asking your coworkers and they don't know. I don't know, man, that I did that so long ago. Like, don't make your coworkers, you know, your onboarding person. HR is your onboarding person. So while you're in those orientations, I know they can be very boring, but that is the time to get those questions answered because you're asking the person you're supposed to ask, right? Don't wait till you get to your site and start talking to your manager because they may not always know. Don't assume because a person works at the company that they know. Maybe they don't even take the insurance plan. So they don't know about the insurance. So don't think that they're going to know. So during that orientation, that is the time to ask questions. When you are in training, there's another time to ask questions, right? Don't just sit through the training and yawn your way through it. This is not like class. This is like work because you only get a certain window for being new. Is that not the case? And after that, people just expect you to know. So take your training seriously. Ask a lot of questions. I would say over ask. Do not feel shy about asking because if you don't walk into your job confident, after training, then they're going to be like, didn't that person go through training? And you don't want that job. Like, you don't want that problem. You don't want having to ask your neighbor to your left or to your right how to do something when it has gone over in training. So make sure you ask questions. I can't say that enough. You want to feel confident going into the work. So do not be afraid to ask questions. I know people are always shy about that, right? There could be, tours of the facility and things like that, that happens. In chapter 13, it gives you this little onboarding topics, things that you may not have thought about. So make sure you go over the little spreadsheet they have here for you. Things that you may forget to ask, like, for all employees, it says, what time do I'm supposed to get to work? That's a big one, right? Because you may just assume 9 o'clock and they'd be like, no, our time starts at 7:30, 8 o'clock. We work from 8 to 6, not 9 to 5, so you better make sure you know what time it is. So we do 7 to 3. You never know if a company is doing a project, they may work whenever that site opens. So make sure you ask those questions. Don't just assume them. Who do I call in case of emergency? If I have computer technical issues, some of you may have little laptops or iPads or whatever they send you out with, some type of communication device, especially if you're going to be traveling, even if you may need some type of office supply, maybe, if you're going out on job sites, you got to take clipboards and pens and pencils and packs or whatever you got to do. You may want to know that if you're on site, what time does the building open is a big one, right? You just assume what time does the building close is an even bigger one, right? Because you don't want to make those assumptions that, you get somewhere, maybe you forgot something and you can't get back in, right? So just make sure you're asking those questions. Remote work, obviously, that may not be something that you have to consider, but you never know. All right. Now, when do you update your professional network? Now, I know we've been talking a lot about networking in this class, and hopefully all of you got your LinkedIn's up. I only see a few people that didn't. How many people connected to anyone in the classroom? Did anybody connect with anyone yet? Maybe not in this class, but your previous class. Anybody? No. All right. Hopefully you will. Hopefully you will. But let's say you get a job. When do you put the job up on your LinkedIn? Now, this is not book textbook. I'm going to tell you what I do. I typically do not put a company up unless I have given them at least 30 days, 30 to 90 days before I put someone up on my platform. Why is that? Well, you know, now I may be a little quicker to make decisions than others, but if I don't feel that this is a good fit or they don't feel like it's a good fit, I'm not going to put you up and then have to take you back down. So I always like to wait it out 30 days, 60 days, sometimes even 90 days before I put companies up on my LinkedIn. That's just me. Obviously you want to, promote that you have a new job. And I know a lot of times people get really happy. Ooh, I have a new job. That's great. But I like to wait it out. One of the reasons why is because if you post them on your LinkedIn, sometimes what will happen is a person can do a search on like that company and try to connect with you. And the next thing you know, like I worked at a company before. I put them on my LinkedIn, and I don't even remember when I did it. But then all of a sudden, all the coworkers started hitting me up. Oh, link with me, link with me. And that's really cute. But I wasn't ready for that. I was like, okay, let me see if I even like this job first before I start linking up with all you people, you know. And one thing to be mindful of too is once you link up with those people, even after you've gone, and let's say you moved on to a new job, you're still connected to the people that you linked with. Where you say, okay, what's the big deal with that? Well, not everybody wants everybody to know what they're doing. So it's kind of like letting someone into your house a little bit. Unfortunately, I had a, 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 a bad experience, and not even me personally, but just working at a company where the CEO was a little weird. He was really he monitored people's accounts for that, which I find weird. I don't know if you find that weird, but he would monitor people's LinkedIn accounts and he would want to see who people were linked to. He would want you to post stuff about the company. Like he wanted you to promote the company if you worked there. Now everybody may have their own opinions about that, but me being a self-serving type of person, like I feel like my LinkedIn account is for me, is to promote me, not to promote any company. But just be aware that there are companies that are going to want you to promote them. They're going to say, oh, can you put this on social media? Connect with me on social media. I'm like, maybe I don't want you in my business like that, you know? So I don't know. So just be mindful of that. Hopefully most of you won't run into that weird stuff. Maybe you don't really care, but just be aware that that happens because companies, it's free marketing for them. So some of them are really overzealous about it. I think a little too intrusive if you ask me, but it happens. So, you can put them up whenever you deem fit, but that's just my 2 cents on that. Now, give me a thumbs up if you've ever had a performance evaluation. Anybody ever had a performance evaluation? Okay, good. I see one. I'm going to give you the old school way it's supposed to go. And I'm saying this because um, I feel like processes, we talk about this in law school a little bit, but processes is something that I think makes people not pay attention to performance. Here's what I mean by that. During the performance evaluation, here's what's supposed to happen. Once you get to a company, your supervisor should sit you down and say, here are the goals for the company. Like the company should have some goals. Sometimes they'll have, your CEO come in during your orientation and give you, oh, here's the big vision for the company. And then your department should drill down to here's how your department is benefiting these goals. right? So let's say, for example, your company decides our goal is to secure 100 new customers this year, and whatever, it doesn't matter, HVAC, welding, VA, electrical, any of you guys. Our goal is to do 100 new customers this year. Your department, whatever your department is, your department is to make sure that you get at least 95% satisfaction with our current employees, our current customers, and your particular department is responsible for, let's say, at least um, five, let's say 5 or 10 new customers every quarter, let's just say, right? And when I say customers, I'm not talking about residential. I could be talking about like businesses, and you don't get a lot of business, especially if it's like $1 million, couple $100,000 projects. So understand. So, if it's little residential, that's different, right? But I'm thinking big time. All right. Where do you fit into that is the point, right? So if your department is responsible for, let's say, 5 new projects a quarter, then you're going to be responsible for supporting that mission. So your particular objectives could be maintaining the 95% customer satisfaction, because maybe you have to work with the project team on a particular project, and they send in the little evaluations on you guys every 6 months or whatever. Um, it could also be making sure that you don't have any deficiencies for that year, whatever project you're working on, like the project person is not saying, oh, this is not right, you guys need to come back, that type of stuff. So a good company will thread that needle for you, right? Here's the big vision. Here's your department's objectives, and here's your objectives that feed into that. Does that make sense? And what a good company would do, I say good company, but I'm just going to say a company that's sophisticated that has this in place, they will tell you that within the first 90 days. They will sit you down and tell you, here are the objectives, here's what we're doing, here's what you're doing. And then they will say, okay, twice a year we do evaluations. We do midpoint, and then we do the final evaluations. We've told you up front what you're supposed to do. We've given you all the metrics for what you're supposed to do. Now, in 6 months, we're going to sit down and say, okay, are you beating your 95% rate? Are you making sure you don't have any errors, right? Because now you understand how what you're doing feeds into the larger mission. And then hopefully by the end of the year, when they sit you down for your evaluation, there's no secrets. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. You got your midpoint evaluation. You know how well you were doing midpoint. And when the final point comes, you already know what you're being evaluated on. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that transparent? Now, does it actually go that way? Very few. I've only had 2 companies that have ever done it the right way. Most companies is like, oh shoot, we have this evaluation that we need to put some paperwork on because it needs to go in a file. They don't tell you objectives. They don't do a midpoint. Like at the end of the year, they throw together an evaluation. Now, let me ask you, the people that have had an evaluation, raise your hand if you had it the first way. Give me a thumbs up. Or give me a thumbs up if you had it the second way. This, let's shoot, this is performance evaluation time. Let's put something together and make sure that we check that box that we've done an evaluation. Why is that horrible? I mean, obviously, once you start working for a company, you don't have any control over it. But the problem is that evaluation follows you. So what do you do if you work for a company and it's like, oh, let's just do this paperwork, get it out the way? Let me give you a hint. Let me tell you a secret. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of Watergate. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of Watergate, the Watergate files from the drama in the presidency a couple years ago. Okay, am I the only one? All right, y'all make me feel so old. Anyway, Watergate was it was all about this big scandal that happened with the presidency, and they went to the files. Maybe you guys have heard of like what's her name, Hillary Clinton and her email file drama. No, okay, let me just keep going. Anyway, so from that Watergate file scandal, we teased in corporate America about always keeping your own files on yourself. Like, don't ever let someone like some HR department whip out a file on you. Oh, and here, Tommy, we have this file on everything you've done or haven't done at this company. No, you don't, because you know what? I have my own file. You always want to keep your own file of everything that you're doing, not just for performance evaluation, but it's to keep track yourself. If your boss tells you, "Hey, Tommy, I want you to do this extra project, thank you so much. Sarah got sick and we need you to fill in." Oh, no problem. I'm going to put it in my Watergate file. On March 2025, I did this extra project because Sarah was sick. That's okay, because see, what's going to happen is you're going to be doing all these different things and you're not going to remember all this wonderful stuff that you're doing for your company. And at the end of the year, especially if your boss in this company is not good at evaluations, he's going to say, "Oh, jot something down about how well you think you did. Now look at it." That's the worst case scenario. And you're going to try to go back a whole year and remember what it is that you've done. But if you have a little file on yourself, you can go to your file and you can be like, "Oh yeah, I took that extra course. I I filled in for Sarah while she was out. I got more than a 95%. I got over 97% customer satisfaction." And you putting that all on your evaluation. Because guess what? Boss man, boss lady, if you don't remember what I remember what I did because I keep a file on myself. Do you understand? And it's another way to push back sometimes when you have a boss for whatever reason, too busy, too lazy, too whatever, that doesn't keep good records on the work that you've done. Your career is much bigger than your supervisor. Don't ever let one person dictate your career, and so what are you getting from that job? You want to make sure you get a good performance evaluation, get your pay, either stay there or move on about your business so you can do your career plan, right? When you stay focused on that career plan, you don't have time to play with anyone. Now, I know that's a little sister girl talking to you because you know I got, but that's how I don't play about my money, and I don't play about my business, my career plan. So I'm just telling you, like, you have to take it that serious, right? So keep your own Watergate files on what you've done. Now, even if you do have a great company that gives you your objectives and you know what you're being evaluated on, still keep your own file, right? Worst case, in that second scenario, sometimes you work for a boss and they're not good at communicating. You're thinking you're doing a wonderful job. And then come performance evaluation time, they have to throw something together and they never really liked you, or they felt like you were trying to take their job and they're all in their feelings because they don't have good emotional intelligence, and they give you a poor evaluation, and you can have an opportunity to say, "No, no ma'am, no sir, let me whip out what I actually have done." You have to protect yourself in that way. If you ever go on to a federal job, if anybody wants to do that right now, is another thing. But oftentimes a state job, a federal level job, which is very common for you guys in trades because just of the major contracting that happens in those arenas. A lot of times they'll want to see your performance evaluations. Like, they're one of the few industries that still want to see previous performance evaluations from other companies. Most companies don't, but they do. Can you imagine? Like, so don't ever let someone affect your career in that way when it comes to performance evaluations. They can be great because, they also determine your promotion, they determine your raises, right? All those things, especially if you're with that company for a minute. You don't want some lazy supervisor that did not do their due diligence just writing up some crap about you. And then that person leaves, and 2 years later, the position comes up, and your new supervisor doesn't really know you. They're going to go to that performance evaluation and they're going to say, "Oh, well, Susie says that, you only did this and you only did that." And you're only as good as you look on paper in the corporate world, right? So be mindful of how you look on paper and don't let anyone else control that. Make sure you're controlling that. Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? I know I kind of ran through that, but it's very, very, very important. If it's not important to you now, trust me, it will be important. It does if your career, it follows you throughout your career. So make sure that you were learning about that if you don't know. Obviously, workplace etiquette, don't have to go into this too much, but we know by now what etiquette means. You have a lot of different forms of etiquette. You have workplace etiquette, you have etiquette when you're networking, when you're on when you're online social media. Yeah, it's not an etiquette class, but I feel like we've talked about it enough, so hopefully you guys are aware of that. I don't know why this disposing of food and beverages, that seems to be a thing, and I think it's because we all come from all walks of life. And common sense is not common for everyone, because what is standard for you may not be standard for someone else. But for some reason, this whole food etiquette tends to come up a lot, as well as maintaining clean areas and things of that nature. Yeah, yeah, it's embarrassing to have to talk about, but it is a thing. I know when I worked at a pharmaceutical company many, many, many years ago, right when I got out of the military, and I worked in the finance department, and there was an accountant there. Now, he probably did not get diagnosed as a hoarder, but he was a hoarder. We had cubicles, and literally, it was like you're walking down the hallway, cubicle. They all look like normal cubicles. And then when you turned the corner to his cubicle, you thought you were at Sanford and Sons. Anybody ever heard of the show Sanford and Sons, the junkyard people? Literally, his cubicle was packed with just stuff like soda cans, like he would have the 12 cases, whatever that is, lined up on the floor. He had old soda cans, he had books, he just stuff. And I don't know if people just felt bad because it was a little older, but it was scary. Like you thought something was living in that cubicle, so don't be that guy. Don't be the hoarder guy, right? Keep your areas clean. That's just common sense. But anyway, again, maybe not always be common to everybody, but there you go. All right. What is common for you guys is workplace safety. You already know, and I'm sure your instructors have told you, you're going to get a lot of safety training, like safety, 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 training. Get used to it. Even in my little work in IT and business, training is training. So you're going to get tons and tons of training. You already know that. Um, but it's a big thing, right? You already know, falling, lifting, materials hazards. Many of you may be dealing with obviously machines. The proper gear is going to be important. That's something else. Those of you that probably all of you, but those of you that are going to be in areas that, are a little bit more dangerous, knowing, how to properly dress. Do you need to bring any of your own safety equipment? Similar to how, and I'm assuming your different, departments may have given you some tools. I don't know if some of your programs gave you tools or not, but do you need to bring your own tools? How do you, what type of safety gear you need to bring with you? Maybe you're making the assumption that they're going to provide it for you and they don't. So that's another good question to ask during your onboarding. Again, workplace ergonomics, you don't have to worry about this. None of you are really going into these types of fields. Unfortunately for me, working in finance and as a writer, was very, very important. I actually did get carpal tunnel before. Not sure if you guys heard of that, but like it's this little I don't know what it is, a sprain or something in your wrist just from typing so much. And it is one of the most painful things you can ever think about. It's funny because somebody says, "Oh, you got injured sitting down during carpal tunnel," but that is one of the most painful things that you can come across. And some people have to get surgery from it. And a lot of it just has to do with the proper seating, where your wrist is placed, eyesight, all kinds of different things. But that's a real thing. So, want anybody teasing me about that? All right. So here's your live conference question for today. I want to know, what is your biggest first day anxiety? And don't give me one word. Don't do that. What is your biggest biggest First day anxiety. Explain in detail. All right. Explain in detail. What is your biggest first day anxiety? All right, my friends, please remember, get everything in by tomorrow at midnight. Tomorrow at midnight. We're almost out of here, guys. We're almost out of here. We got some people graduating, some people already got jobs. I want to get you to the finish line. Let's finish strong, okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Do we have any